The night Rome forgot to breathe began with a scream that no one answered. In a city addicted to spectacle, some streets became spectacles of their own, and in the year 64 CE, while Nero's torches still smouldered over the ruins of the Great Fire, one narrow passageway near the Subura had already earned a reputation whispered like a curse. It was here, beneath tattered awnings and flickering oil lamps, that the empire carved out a place so saturated with vice that even Rome's hardened night watch refused to patrol it. Locals called it *Vicus Septem Peccatorum*. The Street of Seven Sins, Rome's most infamous neighborhood, a name that would haunt generations long after the fire's ashes had settled. Few understood how this single strip of stone became a magnet for runaways, gamblers, debtors, fallen nobles, and the enslaved. But everyone understood one thing. Once the street knew your name, it never gave it back. The smoke of the recent catastrophe still clung to the rooftops, giving the district a sickly haze. Vendors hawked cheap wine from cracked amphorae, brothel doors banged open and shut like broken jaws, and somewhere in the shadows a woman cried into her palms, her voice drowned by the laughter of dice players nearby. Nothing about the street was accidental. Every corner, every doorway, every hidden room had been shaped by Rome's hunger for pleasure and its blindness to what pleasure cost. This was where the city's underbelly surfaced, where elite families sent their disgraced sons to disappear, and where enslaved women vanished into unmarked rooms before dawn. Even Rome's senators warned their household guards, *. If she wanders into that street, she is no longer ours to reclaim. But the Seven Sins did not begin as a sanctuary for depravity. Its origins were painfully mundane: administrative oversight, overpopulation, and the relentless pressure of urban migration. After the fire-leveled districts from the Circus Maximus to the Caelian Hill, thousands of displaced families were forced into temporary encampments. The poorest never left. Makeshift shelters turned into shacks, shacks into permanent hovels, and within a year the area became a maze of cramped corridors where crime grew faster than rebuilding efforts. Slumlords, sensing opportunity, divided old tenements into warrens rented room by room to desperate newcomers. The first sin, poverty, laid the foundation. And poverty, as Romans believed, was a disease that infected every moral fibre of the city. At dusk the street transformed. Torches hissed in the damp air, shadows stretched over cobblestones, and the sound of distant gladiator cheers rolled like thunder from the Colosseum. A man fresh from the arena, hands still stained with dust and someone else's blood, stepped into the alley searching for relief. A girl no older than 15, an enslaved Cappadocian sold for the price of a chicken, stood by the doorway of a gambling den. She recognized the mark on his wrist, the insignia of a lanista. Men like him came here to forget. Girls like her came here because they had already been forgotten. In the Street of Seven Sins, their fates crossed without either having a choice. This was the second sin: desperation. Every person who entered carried a burden, a debtor hiding from creditors who carved tally marks into his door, a widow forced into selling herself after her husband's body vanished in the fire, a freedman who gambled his way back into chains. Rome's legal system, harsh and elegant, had no patience for the weak, and the weak in turn gravitated to each other in places where law dissolved like wine on stone. By midnight, the third sin, pleasure, took over. Pleasure in Rome was not discreet, it was a public currency. Bathhouses overflowed, taverns roared, and brothels operated openly beneath signs that left nothing to the imagination. On this street, though, pleasure was stripped of glamour and offered raw, immediate, and often violent. A brothel keeper known as Later the Red sat on a stool outside her door, twirling a bronze stylus between her fingers. Any man who hesitated was reminded with a smile, * inside, no one remembers your name, not even you. Customers believed her. Many returned unable to stay away, others never walked out again, lost to debt, poison, or the silent justice delivered by rival gangs hidden behind crimson curtains. The fourth sin, greed, held the neighborhood together. Everything was for sale. Forged documents, stolen jewelry, counterfeit coins, information about senators' affairs, even protection from the gangs that orchestrated the chaos. Did you know-style whispers spread through the taverns. Some claimed Nero himself had once disguised his voice, and visited the street during his nocturnal wanderings. Others said senators paid spies stationed at each doorway to observe who entered. Whether truth or rumour, one fact remained chilling. This street had influence, more than anyone dared admit. But beneath greed lurked the fifth sin, violence. It simmered in the walls like trapped heat. Fights erupted over spilled wine, accusations of cheating, or the wrong glance cast at the wrong person. A merchant from Gaul was found one morning with his throat neatly cut, his purse untouched. Rumours suggested he had overheard something he shouldn't have, a whispered plot involving a freedman connected to Poppaea's old household. The seven sins protected its secrets, and it silenced anyone who threatened them. Women learned to walk with blades hidden in hairpins. Men learned to keep their backs against walls. And there was the sixth sin, power. A strange inverted power where the powerless found ways to command fear. Slaves blackmailed masters. Street children ran spy networks for copper coins. A former gladiator, blinded in one eye, served as judge and executioner in disputes. Rome's hierarchy warped inside this narrow corridor. A senator wandering drunk into the alley could be robbed, stripped, humiliated, and no one would report it. Here titles dissolved. Only survival mattered. Finally came the seventh sin, escape. A sin because Rome despised those who rejected its order. The street became a refuge for people fleeing responsibilities the empire demanded. Tax collectors who skimmed funds, legionaries who deserted, wives who fled violent husbands. The more Rome expanded, the more this tiny street filled with those crushed under its weight. And if someone disappeared into the seven sins, even the Praetorian Guard would hesitate before stepping in after them. Yet the most chilling truth lay not in what the street contained, but in what it created. Every generation produced new legends, a noblewoman stripped of her name and sold under a false identity, a scribe who forged imperial edicts and nearly toppled a provincial governor, a street child who burned an entire brothel after witnessing her sister's death. These were not stories told to entertain, they were cautionary tales Rome refused to write into its official histories. As dawn crept across the rooftops, the scent of stale wine evaporated, and the cries of merchants replaced the night's fevered soundtrack. But beneath the ordinary bustle of morning markets, the street of seven sins waited for its next victim, patient, hungry, and unchanging. Because Rome, despite its marble facades and triumphal arches, was sustained not only by its glory but also by its shadows. And this street was the darkest shadow of all. Dawn in Rome was supposed to bring relief. Vendors shouting prices, bakers pulling hot loaves from clay ovens, children chasing one another across the forum. But on the street of seven sins, morning light only exposed everything the night tried to hide. Some streets wake with the city. This one woke against it, resisting the sun the way a wounded animal resists touch. And on this particular morning in 64 CE, as the city still reeled from the Great Fire, a small crowd gathered around something lying in the gutter, a sandal embroidered with purple thread, the kind worn only by the elite, the kind no one would ever expect to see here. The sandal belonged to Livia Calvina, a senator's daughter reported missing 2 nights earlier. The moment her father's household slaves recognized the stitching, whispers shot down the alley like sparks from a torch. Everyone knew what it meant. The seven sins had claimed another soul, and this time she was someone Rome could not afford to lose. Men drank their wine slower. Women pulled their shawls tighter. The street had crossed a line, and in Rome, when lines were crossed, blood usually followed. But how had a woman of her status ended up here? Witnesses later described a scene almost too surreal to believe. She'd been running, barefoot, terrified, clutching a scroll she refused to release. A street boy saw her stumble into a doorway, where 2 shadowy figures pulled her inside. No screams, no struggle. She vanished as if swallowed. What was on the scroll? Why did she flee the Palatine in the middle of the night? No one asked questions. Asking questions on this street was a sin of its own. That day, the seven sins churned like a living beast. Taverns locked their back doors. Brothel keepers whispered to regulars to stay away. A gang of freedmen known as the Ash Dogs hauled buckets of water, ready to douse flames in case the Praetorian Guard decided to smoke the street out. Because when elite blood mixed with gutter stone, retribution rarely walked. It charged. But here was the strange truth. Even Rome's enforcers hesitated. The Street of Seven Sins was less a location and more a system, a self-governing underworld with unwritten rules enforced more efficiently than any imperial edict. Its residents could vanish faster than records could be written. A woman taken in the night became a ghost by dawn. A man stabbed behind the wine shop became a rumor before his body cooled. And with each disappearance, the street tightened its hold on the city that pretended not to see it. As tensions mounted, a new figure arrived. Marcus Valerius Crispus, a tribune known for his ruthless efficiency in quelling riots. He stepped into the alley with 12 guards, each gripping shields still blackened from the fire. Vendors froze. Children scattered. A hush rolled over the street. Crispus had a reputation. He punished before he questioned. But even he paused, studying the narrow corridor as if sensing the weight of unspoken history pressing inward. He questioned witnesses. No one answered. He threatened violence. No one flinched. Someone spat at his sandals. That was when Crispus realized something chilling. This neighborhood did not fear Rome. It feared only itself. Still, one person finally broke the silence, a hunched, wrinkled scribe who kept his wax tablets close to his chest. His hands shook not from age but from memory. He whispered to Crispus that Livia had been seen entering a back room of Later the Red's brothel, escorted by a man wearing a servant's tunic dyed an unusually deep shade of blue. Crispus recognized the description instantly. That color came from Praetorian dye, the rarest in Rome. Only the wealthy, those closest to imperial secrets, could afford it. This was no random kidnapping. It was a message. Crispus ordered the brothel raided. Doors splintered. Lamps crashed to the floor. Men screamed. Women scattered. One guard kicked open a hidden chamber expecting a terrified noblewoman bound to a pillar. Instead, they found the chamber empty except for a single object, the scroll she had carried. Crispus unrolled it, and his breath caught. It was a list of names, senators, generals, freedmen, and even one member of Nero's inner circle, all tied to illegal property seizures after the fire. If this document reached the wrong person, half the imperial administration could collapse. And then came the realization that froze the tribune's pulse. The scroll was missing a seal. Someone had already broken it. Someone had read the list. But who? Outside, the street pulsed with restless energy. The ashdogs prowled like wolves. Old women muttered curses from balconies. A child tugged on Crispus's tunic and whispered, "Sir, you cannot find someone the street has already chosen." Crispus pushed him away, but the words echoed. Even the children believed the Seven Sins made its own decisions about life and death. By dusk, the tribune had no choice but to retreat and regroup. His men left with tense faces, glancing over their shoulders as they marched away. The moment their footsteps faded, the street awakened again. Music drifted from taverns, lanterns swung overhead. Dice clattered like bones shaken in the hands of fate. It was as though the raid had never happened. And then she appeared. Livia Calvina stepped into the light, barefoot, bruised, and carrying no scroll. Her eyes were hollow, as if something inside her had been extinguished. Residents watched in silence. No one approached. No one asked where she had been. She simply walked to the edge of the alley, turned once to stare into its depths, and vanished toward the forum without a word. Days later, she testified before the Senate. She claimed she had lost the scroll fleeing looters. She insisted no one had kidnapped her. She denied ever stepping foot on the Street of Seven Sins. But every person in that alley knew the truth. The street had let her go. Why? No one dared speculate. Not allowed. Some said she had traded information. Others believed someone powerful had intervened. A darker rumor claimed the street required balance. One life returned in exchange for another taken that same night. And indeed, the next morning, the body of a wealthy freedman tied to Nero's treasury was found floating in the Tiber. Was he one of the names on the list? Crispus suspected it but refused to pursue the case. The last thing any Roman official wanted was to wage war against a street that existed outside the empire's reach. As the years passed, the legend of the Seven Sins only grew. Travelers avoided it by instinct. Mothers warned their children never to look down that alley after sundown. Slumlords claimed the district swallowed more fortunes than it ever granted. And yet, for all its danger, some were still drawn to it. Those running from Rome, those hiding from it, those seeking a kind of freedom the empire never offered. This was the final, most terrifying truth. Rome did not control the Street of Seven Sins. The Street of Seven Sins controlled Rome. It was the empire's mirror, reflecting everything it denied: corruption, cruelty, hunger, desperation. A single narrow corridor held more secrets than the Forum, more crimes than the Praetorian barracks, more broken lives than the prisons under the Capitoline. And in every generation, someone disappeared there. In every generation, someone returned changed. In every generation, Rome pretended not to notice. Because some history isn't carved in marble. Some history is carved in fear. If you survived this journey into Rome's shadows, subscribe, because the past holds far darker streets waiting to be explored.